Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. The last time I worked on the Sanford surface grinder, I had removed the elevating screw and discovered that it was fairly worn in one spot and is a very non-standard pitch. So while I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do about that, I'm going to continue doing some additional disassembly. Well, I need to replace all the wiring anyway, and it's going to be easier to clean some sections of the body here if I get this motor control lever off of the side of the machine. Well, if you recall from the first video on this machine of the disassembly, the wires going into the motor connector were in pretty bad shape. The insulation was cracking off of the wires, and this side here is no different. So I'm just going to do the same. I'm going to cut them, and I'll just pull out the old wire and replace it with new when it arrives. I want to get these wires pulled out that go between the controller and the motor, but there looks like there's some kind of a strain relief or a grommet here where it goes into the side of the machine. Well, this is a little interesting. I was expecting this to be plastic, but it almost looks like it's wood. I expect this is maybe a phenolic material. I'm not sure why it's so hard in here, though. I would expected this to be a little bit softer. Maybe the edges of the sheet metal are a little sharper than I would expect. Well, I'm going to see if I can't just pull these wires through without worrying about this strain relief, at least for now. But to make it a little easier to fish the new wire through, I'm going to tie a piece of string here on the end of the wires, and hopefully when I pull this wire through, it'll stay connected, and it'll make it a little bit easier for me to fish the new wire once it comes in. Well, it looks like the strain relief here on the back is going to be equally as difficult to remove and is made from the same wood or phenolic material. Well, it looks like I can actually get this wire moving a little bit, so rather than try to get this strain relief all the way out, I'm going to see if I can't pull this wire through and fish that string around to the back. With that wire out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and remove this motor controller now off the side of the machine. I'm going to get this cleaned up separately, and again, this will make it a little bit easier for me to clean all the gunk and oil and grinding dust that's collected underneath and behind this. Well, the next thing that's going to get my attention is to clean up a little bit of the surface here and this table. It might be really hard to tell from the video, but this table it's bad. It's really caked on with a lot of grinding dust. Yeah, so this is going to probably take some work. I'm going to start by getting these studs out of the way that hold the mag chuck down. You know, at first I thought that these studs might have been threaded into the table, into the position for the mag chuck, but as I looked at it closer, it is just caked with rusty grinding dust. So it looks like these are T-studs of some kind, but there's just so much grinding dust packed into the T-slot that has rusted from, likely from using some kind of a flood coolant, that it's rusted them in place. You know, it's moments like this, coupled with the condition of that elevating screw, that make me question my sanity in wanting to get involved in a project like this. Even though I didn't pay a lot of money for the surface grinder, I'm just wondering if it's just going to be, not worth it to try to restore this thing. It could be so badly worn out that it's really junk. And it's really going to be hard for me to assess that for sure until I at least get it cleaned up. And I wouldn't bother trying to put anything on this thing or try to do any test grinds with it in the condition that it's in. So if I spend a little bit of time cleaning up, maybe that'll pay off, and we'll find out in the end that it's really not in as bad a shape as it might look. But then again, it could be in worse shape. I'm not really going to know. So putting in a little bit of time and not really any money, maybe this, investment in time will end up paying off. Well, I think I've cleared off enough of the gunk that I might be able to use a little percussive action here to try to get this T-stud loose and out of the slot. Well, at least with that T-stud removed, I can get a better idea of just how bad the T-slot is, and it's pretty bad. Um, it's not, long gone. It's just really caked full of dust, grinding dust that has rusted in place, and it's probably created some pitting, but I think that could be overcome. I don't think that's a major deal breaker here, but trying to think if there's any kind of chemicals that I might be able to use to try to dissolve some of this, and quite frankly, I don't think anything I have would work. And I'm kind of in the mode now, so I'm just going to use a lot of mechanical stuff, screwdrivers, picks, whatever I can, to try to get the bulk of this out of here before moving on to the second one. Well, I think I've cleared out enough of the T-slot and the right side. I'll go ahead and get the T-stud here on the left side removed. It's probably going to take equal amount of effort. Well, I think that's clean enough for now. I'm going to do a deeper clean a little bit later, but at least now I can maybe lift this table up onto its edge and get a look underneath and see what the ways look like. I'm going to use a little bit of super clean here just to try to clean off some of the grime and dirt that's on the ways, just to kind of get a visual idea of what they look like. And, first glance, they don't look bad. They're not heavily scored, but I would suspect that there's a considerable amount of wear in them. Not really going to know for sure until I put some, bluing on a straight edge. But before I do any of that, I still want to complete the disassembly of all of the pieces on the table, as well as get it really good and clean. So I want to remove the rack here that is driven by the pinion that's attached to the traverse handle. This is what the table goes back and forth on. Well, underneath the rack, looks like there's some plastic shims that I suspect were to set the proper backlash between the pinion and the rack. I'm going to remove those as well so I can make sure that they're clean and that there's no debris or whatever between the shims and the table and the shims and the rack. Well, the front of the table on this Sanford surface grinder has these two rails and this block that's attached to a T-nut to the front of it. And this appears to be used as a physical stop for the table left and right. I don't see this on any other surface grinder of the same make and model. So I don't know if this was an option that was added later on later models, or if this is perhaps something that was shop made and added by a previous owner. Not real sure. The only thing I do know is those two holes in the middle of the lower rail are where a couple of Gits cups are supposed to go, which feed oil to the ways underneath the table. So I'll get these off of here because I'm sure that there's plenty of grinding dust between them. With the table off, I can get a better look at the saddle. And there's this channel that's just behind the rear V-way. And it's, again, packed full of what I'm assuming is grinding dust, dirt. Well, I'm not exactly sure what this channel is that's back here behind the V-way, but it's coated in oil and dust. And at first I thought it was some kind of maybe a lubricating reservoir or an oil reservoir for the ways underneath the saddle, but I can find no place to fill it and no exit for it. So again, I'm not 100% sure what its purpose is yet, but yeah, this is just all oily grinding dust. Maybe it's just a overflow from the tableways and it all falls into here, although I'm not sure why this would be part of the design. Well, there's a couple of way covers that are screwed down to the back of the saddle. They also have a Gitz cup on them for oiling the ways. We'll get these off and see what kind of mysteries they're hiding. Yeah, this is pretty disgusting. Having this small nozzle on the shop vac makes this a little bit easier to pick up and remove. And if you're wondering where I might have gotten this from, well, I made it. I designed this up in Fusion 360 and I 3D printed it. It's one nice thing about having a 3D printer. When you need something special like this, you can just go make it. Like the rear, there's a couple of way covers on the front. The one on the right was already loose. There's just a couple of screws that fit over some slots in the way cover. Well, on the front top of the saddle, there's this block here with the spring-loaded plunger. This works in conjunction with the rails and that block on the front of the table to limit the left and right movement of the table. Well, it's held in place with a couple of socket head cap screws, but it's also pinned in place with a couple of roll pins. I want to take the table traverse handle off, and in order to get it off, I have to take this pinion off the end of the shaft. It's just held in place with a roll pin. Well, there's likely a burr on the end of the shaft or the bore of the pinion, so I need to punch it out. Well, between the pinion and the saddle, there's this felt washer, and as I remove the shaft out, there's another rubber, like O-ring type washer. Well, and there must be a needle roller bearing in here somewhere because one of the needles just fell out. Well, I'm going to put this shaft over here on the workbench so I can take a look at these bearings and see what I've gotten myself into. I'll use a little brake clean here so maybe I can see a little better what I'm looking at, and I think I might have made this just a little bit worse, although I think this was probably inevitable because more of the needles seem to have come loose. Well, I'm not sure what it's going to take to potentially replace this bearing, so before I go down that path, I'll use some forceps here to try to remove all of the needles and save them, so maybe I can reconstitute this bearing and get it put back together. There's another bearing on the back of this bore. I'm hopeful that that one is still intact. Well, I think that might be all of them. There might be one more here at the top that the magnet isn't catching. I think I can get my finger in here and be able to remove it. But I think that is all of them. I don't believe I lost any. So at this point, I'm just going to hope that I can put this bearing back together because I really don't want to have to try to locate bearings. There's no visible numbers here, so I have no idea what this bearing would even be. Well, the next thing in the disassembly is to remove the nut for the saddle feed. It's just held in place with a couple of socket head cap screws. Once I get these out, I should be able to lift the saddle off of the machine. I'll put it over on the workbench. Now I can take these sliding covers off so I can get them cleaned up too. I'll remove the saddle nut here just by turning the front hand wheel. Well, along with the 3 socket head cap screws, there are some roll pins that hold this front handle assembly to the front of the machine. So I'm going to use a wood chisel here to try to get underneath it and help me pry it off. Well, with that saddle off now, I can spend some time with some super clean and a bunch of paper towels to try to get these ways and the base of the machine good and clean. I do believe that these ways do come off. They are a single piece of material, but I don't want to do that in fear that I end up ruining the alignment. Again, I don't know how far I'm going to take this machine. So for now, I'm just going to do as good of a cleanup as I can. I have also opted to leave the spindle alone, at least for now. I've been told that the spindle bearings are supposed to be sealed for life from the factory, and they feel pretty good. They felt good when it was under power, so for now, I'm going to leave them alone. I did try to remove that front shield, but I had no luck getting it off, so it's just going to stay there for now. I'm also not going to do anything with the vertical ways. There are some gibs in here that can be adjusted. I'm going to clean this as best I can, but I'm not going to disassemble this anymore, again, at least for now. Once I get it cleaned up and put back together, I'll do an assessment on the condition of all this and determine just what I want to do. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week. I'm actually enjoying cleaning this thing up. I was a little bit discouraged at first, but I think I'm seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe this thing isn't as bad as I think it might be. Well, if you like the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Am I wasting my time, or you think there's some merit here? I appreciate all those that are subscribers, and if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and I'd like to do a special thank you for those that support the channel on Patreon or PayPal. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.